Hello and welcome to episode 4 of You Love Us. In this episode, we're looking at the period around This Is My Truth, Tell Me Yours.
Wales's leading band, the Manic Street Preachers, have released their long-awaited new album. Hundreds of fans, thousands actually, queued for more than 12 hours last night to meet the band at a special midnight launch. Earlier, they'd played to 10,000 people at a free concert in Cardiff.
I think it's just about self-discovery, and it's about, first time as a lyricist especially that I've kind of felt comfortable in sort of dissecting bits of Welsh culture, really, and stuff that has had a big effect on us. Whether we realised it or not, when we were growing up, our environment had a really big influence on us.
We finished the last episode with 1996's Everything Must Go and the huge critical and commercial success that album was. The triumphant, you've got to put the word return in inverted commas, of the band. They have never been one for quitting or for taking big breaks, even following the trauma they did with Richey. They came back with that album that was both... It was a Manics album. It contained their trademark lyrics, their style, their influences, but new musical styles and new musical direction. Kevin Carter, Everything Must Go... Design for Life, these songs that were so instrumental, and not only in resetting the band with fans and critics, but also resetting the band within themselves, giving them permission to continue, giving themselves permission to continue, giving themselves that feeling of, oh, it's okay, that we can miss, that we can love, that we can honour, but still produce some of the most amazing songs that they've ever produced. And this continued into 1998's This Is My Truth, Tell Me Yours. This is an album which introduces a bit more of the political, or the overtly, the political on the face of the Manics, and that's something that we will see as we go across the next couple of albums. We will see the wearing of the political view on the sleeve. It's very, very evident, and it's very, very accessible for people to hear and to use. Is this something that they want to learn about? Is it something that they want to celebrate as well? Nicky Wire, looking back at that period, said, in a way, we were still in mourning. Everything Must Go was almost written before Richey disappeared, so it was still very much his spirit. After that, we had to work out who we were without him. With the release of This Is My Truth, Tell Me Yours, they were seen as survivors and poets. It was the time of Britpop, it was the time of Cool Britannia, and the media around that time, they loved a good comeback story, and this isn't a comeback story, and the Manics never truly went away. The number of members changed, but they didn't change. And so, although the press tried to paint them as a band that survived tragedy with resilience, and that Everything Must Go was a reaction to that, it wasn't. Everything Must Go was a natural evolution for the band. It was an album that came out of necessity to survive, to develop, to grow. And this is very evident with This Is My Truth. This is another natural evolution. The Manics have never been a band that have looked at current pop culture and gone, we must shape ourselves in that way. They've never done that, and I don't honestly think they ever will. I think they've been a band that have had their natural trajectory, and at times that may well have crossed quite close to pop culture, but they've never been a band that have shaped themselves. There are other bands out there that have done that. If you look at Blur, for example. I'm not the biggest Blair fan. I'm not an expert on them, but when I've listened to like their first album is very different to the second album, and that feels like a conscious decision to change away from the baggy trouser mop hair brigade to the slightly cooler crafty Cockney. You know, almost like a little bit of comedy thrown in there, a little bit of being cheeky. The Manics have never done that. The Manics have evolved and developed and grown naturally. I think what we see here with This Is My Truth is a band that are quite comfortable talking about their politics, that have come to terms with their loss, that have accepted their new roles within the bands. You know, there's new writing responsibilities. There's this acceptance that, again, we've talked about acceptance already, about it's okay to go on, but it's okay to write lyrics that Richey didn't write. And it's okay that those lyrics aren't Richey's, that they're not Richey's story, that they might be Nicky's story or Sean's story or James' story or somebody else's story. That's okay. And this is what we see in the maturity of the writing of This Is My Truth. We see that come through. We also see some really, really interesting musical styles, particularly if you tolerate this. The choice of instruments in that song, the choice of tempo, of rhythm, of the way it's produced is very, very interesting for the Manics at that time. Late 97, early 98, the band went over to France, to Normandy, to a 17th century house that had been converted into a studio. I will not give you my French pronunciation of the name because it will just destroy it. It wouldn't be very fair. They brought in producer Mike Hedges. Now, Hedges was known for producing songs with a sense of space between the instruments, and I think that is very evident in the work he did with Susie and the Banshees and The Cure, after the Manics with Dido, to some degree with U2. But you can hear it on this album, and I think the track that really sums up the Hedges sound for me is I'm Not Working. There's a wonderful separation of the vocals, of the instruments in that track, which is definitely his style. The whole point of going to France was to get away from the fame, the Britpop paparazzi. God, that's quite hard to say that, Britpop paparazzi. But I think as well, it was the sense of space again. You know, that there's lots of fields. It's a quieter, more relaxed environment. Sean said that we were in this massive old house with creaky floors. At night you could hear owls and foxes. It was like being in The Shining without the axe, which I think is quite good. And I think that really helped the writing of this album. You know, this is the first one without Richey. This is the album where they're proving themselves. It wasn't a recording that they were particularly gentle on themselves. You know, James was said to have done 30 different vocal takes for If You Tolerate This. Hedges said at the time, James wanted every syllable to have the right emotional weight. He's not a singer who ever coasts. And we've already said that this isn't a band that settles. This is a band that grows and develops. And James is well known for that, for practicing his guitar riffs, his solos, his parts. Nicky stuck to his no headphones rule, finding a room, putting a bass amp in, having all the feeds playing in there. So he was getting that more live feeling. Sean could be found in a stairwell, recording cymbals to get that cathedral shimmer to add to the space. Nicky was still very much self-conscious to some degrees about some of the lyrics he's writing, you know, without Richey. And he said that when he'd written Born a Girl, he was a bit reticent to show it to the band, and it was one of those moments where he thought, are they going to think I've gone mad? But James said, I can sing that. And that's when he knew the Manics would always survive. And that's that incredible tale of team, of group, of friends, of solid resilience. He also said that the bass line to If You Tolerate This was him messing around and not being very confident. But James heard it, liked it, calling it weirdly hypnotic, and refused to let him change it. And that's the kind of thing that you need in a band. That you need that, you've got each other's backs, you're pushing forward, you've got confidence in the fact that people can do it. Maybe sometimes you just need to give them a little bit of push. When they'd finished in France, they went back to London's Abbey Road to record some strings, the string parts for the album. And Nicky Wire said that at the time they walked into Abbey Road and they would see their name on the booking sheet, and he said they felt like they were being admitted to a secret club that they'd never join. And that's a wonderful thing. That shows that not only their aspirations from being a young band, but it also shows how much that they were being appreciated at that time. James did admit, though, that he did have a couple of tracks on there, although he didn't allude to it in the interviews. But he did say that he found a couple of tracks were hard to finish because they were too personal to be clever with. Now, it'd be interesting to hear which tracks you think, or if you know which tracks they are. Wire, in an interview in 1999, we made a record we could live with for the rest of our lives. We didn't want to sound like we were trying to please anyone. And I think that, again, this is something that has gone through every album we've looked at so far, that there is this desire to please the fans, or desire, not please the fans, there's a desire to write songs that they know the fans will appreciate, but not change the direction or the sound of the songs to fit an expectation. And I think that just shows that this band is one of the few bands that has enough integrity to trust their fans, to know that they're going to write, that they're going to produce songs that they will love and live with. Let's do a deep dive into the tracks now. So we start the album with The Everlasting, track number 1, a track which is the passage of time, about youth, about mortality, inspired by the poetry of Edward Thomas. Nicky Wire, in an interview in Q in 1998, said that it's a song about sadness, about seeing your own life slip away, about realising that there's more behind you than in front of you. It reached number 11 in the charts when it was released as a single. Enemy was less than, I don't know. Enemy can be a funny critic at times. It said it was sumptuous but dangerously close to middle of the road, which I don't really agree with. Mojo said it was a stadium-sized hymn to melancholy. Next up is If You Tolerate This, Your Children Will Be Next, which reached number 1 in August of 1998, a song about Welsh volunteers in the Spanish Civil War. Based to some degree on a propaganda poster that the band had seen, but also Stephen Spender's poem, The Volunteers. Nicky Wire said, I'd read about the Welshmen who went to fight Franco. I wanted to celebrate them without being jingoistic. It's not about ideals, not war. James said the song is about fading idealism, the idea that people don't fight for anything anymore. Melody Maker saying it was an unlikely number 1, lush, moving and defiantly political in a year dominated by boy bands. Ugh, what a horrible year of domination that would have been. Going back a little bit to closer to their punk roots, on the third track, You Stole the Sun From My Heart. It reached number 5, so it was a very, very successful single. But the subject matter is funny, it's depression during success, it's touring burnout, it's the away from home from an extended period, it's this is everything I want, but then is it? Because look at the cost. James said it's about being in a band, hating myself and then being grateful for it all. Q called it, the upbeat music is the mask, the lyrics are the truth, with Kerrang loving the juxtaposition of pop sparkle and utter despair, which kind of like sums up the Manics, doesn't it? Sparkle and despair. That would be a great name for an album. Ready for Drowning is a metaphor for cultural erasure, which is the Capel Celyn the Welsh village that was flooded in the 60s to create a new reservoir to feed Liverpool. Why I said it's a history song, but it's also about drowning in your own life. Critical reaction was, it went from it's a quietly devastating protest song to possibly that the politics were too subtle for casual listeners. I don't think I agree with that. I think that it is very well written and it is accessible. The story is very, very accessible. Tsunami, which was another single, another hit at number 11, which opens up with that amazing Japanese percussive instrumentation. Just sounds fantastic. And that's the lives of conjoined twins Laurie and Dory Chappelle. And it's about entrapment. It's about lack of autonomy. It's about, we are confined in this space together. You may want to do something that I don't. That's exactly what's there. Why I said it's about the ties that you can't cut, the bonds that you can't escape. Q saying that the beautiful circular bass line drove the song perfectly. NME saying that it wraps empathy into pop perfection. And I've got to agree with it, because as a pop song, yes, the subject matter is very serious, but as a pop song, it is an absolute classic. Now, one of my favourite tracks on the album is My Little Empire. And that's a track about trying to withdraw, trying to reclaim from a public image of somebody. So, you're talking about somebody famous, so pick your favourite pop star, insert name here. How do they get that piece back of them? And that's what My Little Empire is all about. It's about this building this emotional fortress that you can live in. The NME said, my fantasy of disappearing, I could live in a small house, read and never be seen again. Yeah. The Melody Maker saying it had echoes of claustrophobia of the Holy Bible without the violence. I would wholeheartedly agree with that. I would say that My Little Empire could quite easily have been a track on the Holy Bible. I'm Not Working, which for me is the most Mike Hedges type song, so that this producer who'd worked with The Cure and Susie and the Banshees. I would actually say it is actually, when you listen to it, the way that it's actually produced, it's a very Cure-like song. It's got that vibe that the Cure at the time had. It's about creative burnout. It's about, why I said I just didn't want to do anything, touring, recording, interviews. I wanted to stop. Mojo said they found it was oddly playful, contrasting with the rest of the album's grandeur. And I would agree, because it's not your typical manic song. It could be a song, they've collaborated with lots of artists now, and this could have been a song that went to another artist. I'm glad it didn't. I'm sure Kylie Minogue would have done a great version of it, but I'm glad that it stayed with the Manics. But it's not an overly Manics type song, if that feels okay to say. You're tender and you're tired, about the compassion fatigue, emotional exhaustion in relationships. Why I said it's about the people you love being worn down by the world, with Uncut calling it achingly beautiful. Although some critics did say it was maybe not musically that strong a track. But that's the beauty of music, isn't it? That sometimes music can be very, very simple or straightforward. You look at With or Without You, not With or Without You. With or Without You by U2. Look at that track, that is the rolling. It's 4 chords all the way through it. I don't even think the bass line changes once. So musically very simple, musically very straightforward, but a very, very effective track. Born a Child, why I said I'm not transgender, but I've never felt comfortable in the skin of a man. This was me saying that out loud, and that it's about alienation from masculinity. So not necessarily about gender identity, but sometimes being a man, and I'm sure, although I've never experienced it, sometimes being a woman, expectations can make you feel uncomfortable rather. You are expected to act in this way, or you are expected to respond in that way, and that could make you feel uncomfortable, and that is because of how people perceive the role of a man or the role of a woman. James said that this was one of the bravest lyrics that Nicky had ever given him to sing, and it was widely praised for its honesty. The Guardian called it startling in its tenderness. Be Natural, a song about self-doubt and authenticity. A closing track in many of the live sets around that time. Wire said he tried to make it like a hymn for survival, which is beautiful. And then Q saying, this is great. It's pure widescreen Manics. With even some reviewers saying that this is this album's answer to a Design for Life. I'm not sure Design for Life needed an answer, and I'm not sure that this song was written that way. But yeah, they can be bed buddies, can't they? Another favourite of mine next, Black Dog on My Shoulder. It's this thing about depression always being there, that if you are unlucky enough to suffer from depression, that you're never cured of it. It is always there, and it's an ever-present weight. You might not be in the lows of that, but that weight is always there, and it's always just whispering in your ear. Why I said, it's one of the most literal songs he's ever written. Sometimes you just don't need metaphors, with Melody Maker praising it for its intimacy amid the grandeur. And I think, they said earlier that You're Tender and You're Tired may be too slight musically. Well, Black Dog on My Shoulder is very, very straightforward musically. But that's the great thing about that song, is it being more simple in the musical construction allows the song, the lyrics to breathe, to push out further and further. One of Nicky's stronger ones now, Nobody Loved You, about the media hypocrisy around the death of Princess Diana. Nicky even going so far to say we weren't fans, but the spectacle disgusted me. The same people who hounded her were crying over her coffin. Any me calling it one of Wire's sharpest political songs. Although some reviews did say that tonally it didn't fit with the rest of the album. But I think that's the beauty of a Manic Street Preachers album, is that you can have, you don't want 10, 11, 12, 13 tracks that all necessarily fit together beautifully. This is a band that puts what they've written out as an album, and that's what I think we all appreciate about them. And then definitely their strongest, one of their strongest political songs, South Yorkshire Mass Murder, about the Hillsborough disaster, where 97 Liverpool fans were unlawfully killed. Why I said we didn't want to hide behind clever language for this one. It's about Thatcher, the Tories and the police. Simple as that. James said it's probably the most direct political lyric Nicky's ever given me. There's no irony, no escape route. It is a very sparse, and we'll go back to maybe musically simple arrangement. Acoustic guitar, bass, light percussion, string quartet. It's deliberately restrained. It is about giving the words nowhere to hide. It is about presenting the story, the message directly to you. Melody Maker calling it a chillingly calm piece of righteous fury, with The Guardian praising it for its courage, noting placed political anger over chart ambitions even at the height of their success. And I think that's what is true about the Manics from beginning until now, is that their political anger, their beliefs have always come first when it comes to, do they want to be successful or do they want to be honest? They always want to be honest. This is my truth, tell me yours. It's hugely successful, both commercially and critically. Its initial run sold over 1.2 million copies. It spawned 4 massively successful singles, a number 1 for the band. It won them the Best British Album at the Brit Award in '99. They were nominated for Best British Group and Best British Single. And the album was also added to the list of greatest albums of all time by Q Magazine. Wow, it consolidated the fact that the Manics could and would survive as a 3-piece, that they could and would honour the legacy of Richey being in the band, that they could and would deliver for the fans that had been with them from the beginning or who had recently joined them. You know, it goes to show that this is a band with a huge amount of respect, not only for each other's, but for the Manics family at large. So join me next time. Hope you enjoy, and thanks again for listening.